What if burnout wasn't exhaustion, but grief? Welcome to the Relit Practice, the podcast for therapists, burnout recovery, and sustainable career support for psychologists, counselors, social workers, and other mental health professionals working in healthcare, community agencies, and private practice. My name is Stacey Steele, and I'm a registered psychologist and EMDR consultant specializing in trauma and burnout recovery for therapists. Here, we talk honestly about burnout, moral injury, trauma work, and the systemic realities of helping professions while we build sustainable, ethical, and fulfilling lives and work. Everything on this podcast is guided by the Relit Practice 5 principles of recognize and release burnout, repair and rewire overfunctioning patterns, restore rhythm and regulation in our day-to-day life, redesign practice for long-term sustainability, and relight our passion so that we can stay in this work without losing ourselves. Today, we're talking about something many mid-career therapists feel, but maybe struggle to articulate. And that's what if burnout isn't exhaustion and it was grief, moral injury, and that's why rest doesn't fix it. Many clinicians turn this frustration inward. They might say, maybe I'm not cut out for this work. I'm not resilient enough. Other times they might feel that other people seem to be managing this fine. Why can't I? Something must be wrong with me. Often what is happening is not a need for more rest. It is a nervous system responding to ongoing ethical strain and cumulative stress. Decades of research show that burnout is a breakdown in the relationship between a person and their work, especially when there are mismatches in workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and in values. When clinicians are repeatedly asked to practice in ways that are in conflict with their ethics, burnout can escalate significantly. So when somebody says, you just need rest, they're treating exhaustion, but burnout lives deeper. Burnout as grief and moral injury is where many therapists feel seen. Burnout often appears when systems block ethical care, caseloads exceed human limits, productivity overrides healing, documentation replaces connection. Maybe somebody might have to be discharged too early and you know they need to stay on. And you know what a client does need, but you don't have the ability to provide it. Now that's moral injury. Research shows that moral injury predicts burnout much more strongly than workload alone. Studies during and after COVID found that clinicians that were forced into ethically compromising conditions reported higher burnout and psychological distress than people who reported higher workload and demands alone. When you repeatedly act against your values or you witness harm you can't prevent, something deeper inside of us erodes. We're not just tired, we're grieving. We're grieving the care we wanted to give, but we were prevented in giving, the standard of care that we once held, and maybe our own integrity feels like it's slipping away. So rest does not repair moral injury. Repair requires restored agency. Research on recovery experiences do show that temporary mood improvements happen after breaks from work, but burnout frequently returns within weeks when job condition remains unchanged. So workplace design plays a central role in burnout recovery. When clinicians return from a leave of absence to unsafe caseload sizes with high acuity, productivity metrics that are in conflict with care quality, limited autonomy, even over their own schedule, and repeated ethical compromises, the nervous system quickly shifts back into that stress response. And then many therapists feel discouraged when time off fails to restore their capacity. And again, the issue is rarely personal coping ability, it's the underlying conditions that remain. Burnout also mirrors trauma physiology. Research in psychology link burnout to altered cortisol patterns, emotional blunting, cognitive fatigue, and decreased executive functioning. Chronic burnout also presents as hypervigilance before sessions, shutdown at the end of the day, emotional numbing, and feeling dread instead of fatigue, kind of like those Sunday scaries. That's a part of a prolonged survival mode that your body is in. It's not being lazy, it is adapting to the sustained stress. So what actually heals burnout? Sustainable recovery typically involves greater autonomy, even in our schedule and caseload, ethical alignment, manageable demands, and meaningful clinical work. In practice, this may look like caseload limits, redesigning your schedule, protecting documentation time, and maybe if you're in private practice, adjusting your fee structures. Ultimately, for some people, it is leaving those chronically harmful systems. Those changes do protect capacity. Regulation tools such as breath work and grounding are helpful. Yet without that structural change, they often function as coping inside ongoing stress. In reality, burnout improves when your work becomes sustainable. I want to ask you, does your burnout feel more like being tired or disillusioned? Do you want more sleep or do you want your work to make sense again? Do you need a break or do you need a way to practice in alignment with your values? Notice the difference between sleep and numbness, fatigue versus dread, and busyness versus ethical strain. Maybe pause this recording and grab a paper and a pen or open your notes app because I have a few questions for you. Think of the why you got started in this work. Maybe see that grad student, nervous but eager to see their first client, or your practicum student self, walking through the doors of that agency for the first time. As you bring that to mind, notice what that literally feels like, physically and emotionally. In that time period, what were you hoping for? What did you envision for this line of work? And what has changed since then? Now go ahead and pause again and write your answers down. As you reflect on the answer of what you were expecting and what actually is, the difference between your hopes and reality may be where grief lies. Think of a time, maybe recently, where you felt inspired for your work. It could have been in a training, a consultation meeting, maybe a program development meeting, or even seeing a reel or a post that grabbed your attention. So you bring it to mind, what does that feel like for you right now, physically and emotionally? What was it about that piece of inspiration that you were excited for? Pause the recording and write down your answers. Now that feeling, that excitement, that inspiration, remember that. That feeling is your what in this work. So what can you do more of that sparks that feeling? Can you bring to mind a time where you know you made an impact on someone? Maybe it was a therapeutic aha, or the relief when somebody's social housing application went through, or maybe you were supporting and walking somebody through their loss. What did that moment feel like? What was it like for you to sit with somebody and bear witness to their healing? That feeling is the how and the who of this work. How do I make an impact and with who? Just pause this again and write it down. Now, what I want you to do is to read your why, your what, your who, and your how. And on really tough days, pull that list out and reread it. And let your experience be the stewards that help you through moments of grief, injury, and burnout. Friends, I want you to know that burnout is not a personal flaw. It is often grief, layered with moral injury and prolonged stress. If rest hasn't worked for you, that doesn't mean that you're failing. It just means that something else is going on. Something in your system, external and internal, needs to change. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe so you don't miss future conversations on therapist burnout recovery, moral injury, nervous system healing, and sustainable clinical practice. And I invite you to join the Relit Practice newsletter for grounded tools and reflection prompts that can help you get through this work without losing yourself. And if you're ready to address burnout at a structural and nervous system level, you can also join the Relit Practice waitlist. Links are in the show notes. My friends, you deserve a practice that sustains you. I'll see you next episode.